There was once a city so vast, so powerful, and so magnificent that ancient writers believed it was the center of the world. A city of towering walls, shining temples, and gardens that seemed to touch the sky. A city whose name echoed across empires. Babylon. More than 2,500 years ago, on the fertile plains between the rivers of Mesopotamia, Babylon rose to become the greatest city the ancient world had ever seen. Travelers approaching it from the desert would first see the dust of the plains giving way to green fields. The land here was different. Water flowed through canals carved from the great river nearby, the mighty Euphrates River. Palm groves and farmland stretched across the horizon, fed by irrigation systems that had been built and improved over generations. But above these fields rose something far more impressive: walls. Not simple fortifications, but colossal defenses stretching for kilometers across the landscape. These were the legendary walls of Babylon, massive structures of mud brick and stone that ancient historians claimed were wide enough for chariots to race along their tops. Watchtowers rose high above the plains. From them, soldiers could see caravans approaching from many miles away. Merchants came from every direction, from the mountains of Anatolia, from the cities of Phoenicia along the Mediterranean coast, from the distant lands of Persia. All roads eventually led here, to Babylon. And at the northern entrance of the city stood one of the most remarkable gates ever built in the ancient world, the Great Ishtar Gate. Its surface was unlike anything travelers had seen before. Deep blue glazed bricks shone in the sunlight like polished stone. Across those blue walls marched rows of sacred animals, lions, bulls, and the strange dragon-like creature known to the Babylonians as the Imush-Hushu. Each animal formed in raised relief across the shining bricks, each one a symbol of the gods who protected the city. For those entering Babylon, passing through this gate was more than simply entering a city. It was entering a world capital. Beyond the gate stretched a grand avenue known as the Processional Way. This wide ceremonial road cut directly through the heart of Babylon. Its pavement was laid with carefully fitted stone slabs, worn smooth by centuries of footsteps, chariots, and religious processions. On either side of the road rose tall walls of glazed brick, and along those walls marched an endless procession of lions, hundreds of them, each lion identical in form, each one symbolizing the goddess Ishtar. In the golden light of late afternoon, those lions seemed almost alive as their shadows stretched across the road. Here, the life of the greatest city of its time unfolded. Merchants displayed goods brought from distant lands, fine textiles dyed in deep crimson, copper tools and weapons, clay vessels and carved ornaments. The languages spoken here came from across the ancient world. Traders bargained, travelers rested, messengers hurried along the road carrying news between palaces and temples, and above it all rose the distant skyline of Babylon. Temples, palaces, and towering above them all, a structure that dominated the horizon, the Great Temple Tower, the ziggurat known as Etemenanki. To the people of Babylon, it was a sacred mountain built by human hands, a bridge between earth and heaven. Its enormous stepped terraces rose high above the surrounding buildings. Priests climbed its stairways carrying offerings to the gods. From its upper platforms, they studied the movements of the stars and planets. The structure was so immense that it could be seen from nearly every district of the city. And as travelers moved deeper along the processional way, it grew larger with every step. Soon, the ceremonial road opened into the sacred district. Here, the atmosphere changed. The noise of markets faded. Temple courtyards replaced crowded streets. The air carried the scent of burning incense.
Babylonian priests in long white robes moved slowly through the open plazas. Some carried offerings of grain and fruit. Others tended sacred fires burning near stone altars. The temples themselves rose in massive mud brick structures decorated with colored tiles and carved symbols. These were the houses of the gods. And at the center of them all stood the towering ziggurat. The stairways leading upward seemed almost endless, each level rising above the last in perfect geometric order. Ascending the structure, the city of Babylon began to unfold below. From the terraces of the ziggurat, one could see the vast scale of the metropolis, flat rooftops stretching across the plains, temple towers rising above residential districts, and beyond them all, the shining ribbon of the Euphrates River cutting through the city. Babylon was not simply large, it was immense, one of the largest cities the world had ever known. Its population likely reached hundreds of thousands. Within its walls lived merchants, soldiers, priests, artisans, scribes, and nobles. Every district had its purpose, every street connected to the great arteries of the city. And somewhere beyond the temples, beyond the crowded avenues and market squares, lay the royal district, the palace of the king, the ruler who had transformed Babylon into the greatest city of the ancient world. His name was Nebuchadnezzar II. Under his rule, Babylon reached the height of its power. Its walls expanded, its temples rebuilt, its monuments grew larger than ever before. But perhaps the most extraordinary creation of his reign stood above the royal palace itself, a structure that ancient writers would later call one of the wonders of the world. A series of massive terraces rising above the palace walls, covered not in stone or brick, but in trees, in flowers, in flowing water. The legendary Hanging Gardens of Babylon. And as the sun began to sink lower over the city, their green terraces slowly came into view above the palace skyline.
Above the royal palace of Babylon rose something no traveler expected to find in the middle of the Mesopotamian plains: gardens. Not simple courtyards of trees and flowers, but entire terraces of greenery built high above the ground. Stone platforms stacked one above another, massive columns supporting layers of soil deep enough for trees to grow. This was the structure later known as the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. To those walking through the palace district below, the gardens seemed almost impossible. Green forests rising above stone walls, vines hanging from terraces, trees growing where no trees should grow, water flowing down channels carved through the stone. In a land where the summer sun burned the earth dry, these gardens were a miracle of engineering. Babylonian builders had constructed an irrigation system that carried water upward from the nearby Euphrates River. Some ancient writers described mechanical devices lifting water from the river. Others believed hidden pumps or chains of buckets carried water upward through the terraces. However it worked, the result was astonishing. Streams of water flowed gently across the terraces. Small cascades spilled from one level to the next. The sound of running water echoed softly through the shaded pathways. For the nobles of Babylon, the gardens were a place of cool air and quiet conversation. Palm trees and fruit trees cast long shadows across the stone walkways. Flowering plants filled the air with fragrance. From the terraces, visitors could look out across the entire city, and what they saw was a metropolis unlike any other in the ancient world. Babylon stretched across the plains in every direction. Dense districts of homes built from sun-dried mud brick filled the landscape. Flat rooftops formed an endless pattern across the city, Temple towers rose above the streets, palace walls enclosed courtyards filled with fountains and palm trees, and far in the distance, the outer defensive walls formed a vast boundary between the city and the desert beyond. From above, one could see the ceremonial road that led across Babylon, the Processional Way, a long axis running through the city toward the northern gate, and far beyond the rooftops, glowing faintly in the fading sunlight, stood the famous Ishtar Gate. Even at this distance, its deep blue glazed bricks reflected the light of the setting sun. As evening approached, the city slowly began to change. Markets closed their stalls, caravans unloaded their goods in quiet courtyards, families gathered on rooftops to escape the heat of the day, and across the temple district, priests prepared the evening rituals. From the terraces of the ziggurat Etemenanki, watchers studied the sky. The Babylonians were among the greatest astronomers of the ancient world. Night after night, they recorded the movement of planets and stars. They believed the heavens carried messages from the gods, and from the highest temple towers of Babylon, they searched the sky for signs of the future. Below them, the great city slowly filled with light. Servants walked the palace courtyards lighting oil lamps. Torches flickered along temple walls. Along the Processional Way, rows of flames illuminated the lion-covered walls. Their shadows danced across the glazed bricks. The great avenue that had once carried royal processions now glowed in warm firelight. Beyond the palace district, the waters of the Euphrates reflected the growing lights of the city. Boats drifted slowly along the dark surface of the river. Bridges connected the eastern and western districts of Babylon. The city lived long after the sun had disappeared. From the terraces of the hanging gardens, Babylon looked almost endless. Thousands of small lights flickered across the streets and courtyards. Temple fires burned in sacred enclosures. The ziggurat tower rose above everything else, a dark silhouette against the night sky. Above it stretched the stars of Mesopotamia, clear and brilliant in the desert air. And for a moment, standing above the city, one could understand why ancient writers believed Babylon was the center of the world. It was not only its size, nor its wealth, nor its towering monuments, it was the feeling that everything led here. Trade routes, armies, ideas, cultures, empires. For centuries, Babylon stood as one of the greatest cities humanity had ever built. But history is never still. Empires rise, and eventually they fall. The glory of Babylon would not last forever. Conquerors would come, walls would crumble, the great temples would slowly turn to ruins, and the gardens that once hung above the palace would vanish into legend. Today, the city that once ruled the ancient world lies silent beneath the sands of Iraq. But for a moment in history, Babylon was unmatched, a city of walls and temples, of rivers and gardens, of firelight and stars, the greatest city the ancient world ever built.